remember, recollect, remind, retrospect, 4 hours test of mindfulness. The 6 senses, 5, 6, 1, shows how they behave. All 5 senses only take objects in the present, but the 6th sense takes objects of past, present, future. Only one object can the mind take at any time. So 5, 6, 1 is the base for Ada anchor. Ada anchor, rule of thumb to still the monkey mind. Accept all things, don't reject, follow or ignore. Acknowledge them, anchor mind to the 5 senses. Free and easy, touch and go at the 5 senses. But when sleepy, often check, back and head are straight. Eyes open wide, point and shoot, hit and run, don't wait. And when awake, be alert, catch the sleepy mind. Beneficial, appropriate, relevant and real. Use the bar test on intense, then act if they pass. If they don't pass, BAR, then jump to the last. See the 3 signs, verify, cause and condition. Bet and tip me, 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Beneficial and truthful, timely and polite. Said with metta, can't be wrong, that's well-spoken speech. Drown not in remorse, but redeem and resolve, then refrain the next time round. 4 hours of regret with right effort. So, I'm glad to meet up with you guys again. Most, if not all of you, have probably noticed that I have changed open awareness to open mindfulness, and are probably wondering why. So, today I will start the session by preemptively answering the question why I changed open awareness to open mindfulness. Well, recently I've come to realize that among Buddhist practitioners, the words awareness and mindfulness have become so garbled because of their indiscriminate usage by modern meditation teachers, including myself. I own up, I plead guilty to being one of the perpetrators of this confusion. And so today I want to make amends by trying to unconfuse you, hopefully. In conventional English, awareness is often used as a synonym for consciousness, as we can see from these 2 sentences. For example, there should be more public awareness of the benefits and possible side effects of vaccination. There should be more public consciousness about the benefits and possible side effects of vaccination. So we see that these 2 sentences are interchangeable, and there's no significant difference between the 2. However, in the translations of Buddhist scriptures, the word consciousness is reserved specially for vijnana. And therefore, we have terms such as eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. No one ever translates them as eye awareness, ear awareness, nose awareness, and so forth. Yet, I often say, the five senses can only be aware of their respective sense objects in the present moment, whereas the mind sense can be aware of objects in the past, present, future, and beyond. So here it is obvious that I'm using the word aware in a very general sense of being conscious of something. And it is precisely because of this very general and non-specific meaning of awareness that it is avoided by most English translators as a rendering for any particular Buddhist term. Currently, I know of only one exception, and that is in Ajahn Thanissaro. Ajahn Thanissaro prefers to translate the Pāli word ceto as awareness. And some of you may be familiar with this Pāli word, ceto vimutti. And Ajahn Thanissaro translates it as awareness release. Whereas all other translators, as far as I know, translate it as liberation of the mind. Now, if you don't understand Pāli and you come across these two translations, awareness release on the one hand and liberation of the mind on the other, would you think that they refer to the same thing? No, right? Especially if you have the idea that awareness is synonymous to mindfulness, then you will be wondering, what on earth is mindfulness release? How do I release my mindfulness? Right? And there's also another word which has ceto in it. I don't know if you are aware of this word. This is in Pāli is called ajjattang ceto samatha. You may not be aware of this Pāli word, but this comes from a sutta that I often quote. It's about the difference between samatha and vipassanā. Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta number 94, where the Buddha talked about four types of individuals. One who has samatha without vipassanā, one who has vipassanā without samatha, one who has neither samatha nor vipassanā, and one who has both samatha and vipassanā. All right? So in this sutta, this phrase is used, ajjattang ceto samatha. And here, Ajahn Thanissaro translates it as internal tranquility of awareness. Whereas other translators translate it as internal serenity or stillness of mind. Samatha means stillness or stilling, or you could use it as a more passive noun as serenity. Of course, mindfulness is also a form of awareness, but it's a very specialized sort of awareness, which is awareness of a past object. Whether that object is in the distant past, like lifetimes or aeons ago, or it's in the immediate past, like what you just sense through the five senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling with the body, or anger that has just arisen, or greed that has just arisen, or the mind that has wandered off from a meditation object. These are the immediate past. Or it could be anywhere in between the immediate past and the distant past, which I call the intermediate past. Let's say between your early childhood and maybe 5-10 years ago, a few weeks ago. So mindfulness is actually a form of awareness, but it's a very specialized form of awareness that can only be conscious of objects in the past. Now, since our five senses can be aware only of their respective sense objects in the present moment, mindfulness cannot arise in the five senses, right? Because mindfulness is only aware of a past object, whereas the five senses must only be aware of a present object. Therefore, mindfulness can only arise in the mind. Another point to note is that all our six senses are aware all the time. And therefore it is meaningless to tell a yogi, try to maintain continuity of awareness. You don't have to try. You're aware all the time, whether you like it or not. That is the ultimate suffering. The ultimate suffering, the sankhara dukkha of existence. As long as you have the five aggregates, they are arising and passing away from moment to moment without stop. That is the ultimate suffering of oppression by incessant arising and passing away. You can't control it. No one can control it. Even arahants and Buddhas have to experience this suffering until they attain final liberation. Parinibbana, when they pass away from this human existence, then at that time the five aggregates cease without remainder. Okay? So, what should the yogi do? Instead of telling the yogi, try to maintain continuity of awareness, which is really meaningless, the yogi should try to maintain continuity of mindfulness. What does this mean? In the context of open mindfulness, this means we are trying to open up our mindfulness to whatever is happening at the senses without being distracted by any thoughts about what's going on. Initially, we start off by trying to anchor our mind to the five senses. This is what most people understand as present moment awareness. Well, if you are using English in a conventional sense, that's quite true. You are trying to be aware of your present activities. And therefore you say that it's present moment awareness in the sense that the awareness is being aware of things that are happening in the present moment. But from the ultimate sense, from the very micro perspective, this is not correct. Your five senses perceive their respective sense objects first. Then only after that, mindfulness notices the sense experience. Your ears hear a sound first, and then mindfulness is aware of the hearing. Your body feels a sensation first, and then mindfulness notices that sensation. Your mind wanders off first, then mindfulness notices that it has wandered off. Anger arises first, then mindfulness notices that anger has arisen. So mindfulness is always one step behind. Let me give you another example. This is straight from the suttas. Let's look at ānāpānassati. You all know what ānāpānassati means, right? Mindfulness of the in-breath and the out-breath. We are all breathing in and out all the time. But are you aware? Are you aware that you're breathing, even not to say in and out? Are you aware that you're breathing? Before I pointed this out to you, you're probably not even aware that you're breathing. But you are breathing in and out, and your body actually feels the sensation of the air going in and out of your body. But the mind doesn't know, because the mind is occupied with other things. That's why the Buddha's opening instruction for ānāpānassati sutta is So sato va assasati, sato va passasati. Ever mindful, he breathes in. Ever mindful, he breathes out. You are breathing in and out all the time. The body is aware of the sensations that are felt as the air goes in and out of your body, but the mind is not. You have to pay special attention to be mindful of the process of breathing in and breathing out. And only after that can you go on to the next step, which is Digang va asasanto, digang asasamiti pajanati. When breathing in long, he knows, I am breathing in long. So knowing whether you are breathing in long or short is a consequence of being mindful. If you had not been mindful, you wouldn't know whether you are breathing in long or short. You won't even know that you are breathing. because it's on auto mode. All right, so here again, we can see that mindfulness is not awareness of the real present, it is awareness of the immediate past in this particular sense. So from my scheme of the 4 hours of mindfulness, this is the last one, retrospect, where you look back at what had happened. But this is by no means confined to just the immediate past. Retrospect means you can go back as far as you want to look back at something that had happened in the past, from the immediate past to the distant past. And this is used in relation to things that you did not deliberately memorize. You did not memorize the sensations as they were felt when the air goes in and out of the body, but you look back at it anyway. So in the same way, people who look back at their past life also look back at things that happened in the past, not necessarily those things that they had memorized. So if you are looking back at things that you had already memorized, that would be the second R, recollection. Right? First you remember, and then you recollect, then you remind, and then finally the last R is retrospect. So based on what we have covered so far, what is the difference between awareness and mindfulness? Awareness is being conscious of an object. Awareness has this very general, non-specific sense of just being conscious. But mindfulness is awareness only of an object in the distant, intermediate, or immediate past. All right? So you can see that mindfulness is a subset of awareness, and we should not mix up the two. Because if you did, then you tie yourself up in knots. For example, and even if you use it in another context, like what Ajahn Thanissaro did when he translated Ceto Vimutti as awareness release, whereas others translate it as liberation of the mind. Okay, now before I end this short explanation, I will go on to another problem that you can face. 2 examples of what can happen if you mix up awareness and mindfulness. Some time ago, I was asked this question, how to be aware of awareness? So the question is, what is aware of what? You see, before we can answer this question, you must understand the nature of the mind. I'll give you a simile. Your thumb cannot touch itself. It cannot touch itself. It can touch another finger, but it cannot touch itself. If you are staying inside a house, you cannot have an external view of the house. So, awareness or consciousness cannot be aware of itself while it is happening. All right, this is the important thing that you need to understand. So when we say, try to be aware of the awareness, so obviously the first aware is mindfulness, because mindfulness is trying to be aware of a previous moment of awareness. It cannot be aware of itself. So that previous moment of awareness could be mindfulness itself, which is also a form of awareness, but a very specialized form of awareness, or it could be any of the 6 sense consciousness. It could be consciousness that is associated with any of the 6 senses, because that's awareness too. And that's why, you see, when you mix up the two, then you tie yourself up in knots. So when you say, try to be aware of the awareness, you are trying to use your mindfulness to look back at either the previous moment of mindfulness or whatever that has just occurred in any of the 6 sense consciousness. Okay? This one is a comprehension test. I want to see how many of you really understood what I've been trying to explain. Okay? So now you look at what is going to be shown on your screen, and then you answer this question. When the mind is not aware of what's happening in the body and the mind, but is aware of the story in daydreaming, is there a break in awareness or mindfulness? Okay, is there a break in awareness or a break in mindfulness? I want to see how many of you say that there is a break in awareness. If you say that there is a break of awareness, can you raise your hands?
7, Bhante.
7 out of 100 lah. Wow, not bad lah. Okay. Now you look at this, it means to say that you have not understood what I said. How can there be a break of awareness? Even when the mind is not aware of what's happening in the body and the mind, it is still aware. It is aware of the story that it is creating. So as I said earlier, it's meaningless to tell a yogi to try to maintain continuity of awareness because you're aware of the time whether you like it or not. So there's no break of awareness. It's just a break of mindfulness. Now I'm going to talk about the terminology that I'm going to update. So from now on, I will try my best not to use the word open awareness. Whenever I want to refer to mindfulness, I will not use the word awareness as a synonym for mindfulness. If I do use the word awareness, then I will use it in a very general sense of just being conscious of an object. For example, the five senses can only be aware of their respective sense objects in the present moment, but the mind sense can be aware of objects in the past, present, future, or beyond. All right? So this is a general usage of awareness. So whenever I use awareness, it will not mean mindfulness. Mindfulness is mindfulness. Awareness is just has a general meaning of being aware of anything, past, present, future, and beyond. So instead of open awareness, I will say open mindfulness. Instead of saying you come from a focused awareness practice, I will say you come from a focused mindfulness practice. For example, ānāpānassati sutta, ānāpānassati, mindfulness of in-breath and out-breath. It's not called awareness of in-breath and out-breath. It is called mindfulness of in-breath and out-breath. So that is a focused mindfulness background. It's like ānāpānassati when you're doing metta, when you're doing arahang, and when you're doing other anchor for this focused mindfulness. Instead of acknowledging what is going on in your mind, you just ignore and then you come back to the five senses. That is the other anchor for focused mindfulness. Instead of using focused open awareness, I will use focused open mindfulness, and this refers to point and shoot, hit and run, or when you are engaged in activities requiring attentiveness. You cannot afford to practice defocused mindfulness at that time. You have to be focused on what you're doing and yet still be mindful of what's happening around you. So the focused open mindfulness is when you are in a safe and secure environment, then you can practice free and easy touch and go while you maintain a defocused gaze. Right? And also when you practice other anchor for open mindfulness, don't reject, don't follow, and don't ignore. Then you acknowledge and then you come back to the five senses. Okay, so I hope I've made myself clear. I've succeeded in de-confusing you. And if you still have any questions regarding what I've just spoken, you may ask for clarifications now. Otherwise, I will open up to the floor for any other questions.
So yes, Bhante, thank you for taking my question. How does one prove, that the body is aware of whatever it's aware of, be it the heartbeat, be it the skin that is in contact with the chair?
The body is aware of all these sensations all the time. It's only that your mind is not mindful of it.
So yes, as you just said that sentence, how does one prove that with due respect? How is it proven that the body is always aware?
Oh, I see. Okay, I'll give a very good example. When you eat something and it goes into your digestive system, the body is able to recognize what is being eaten. The body is able to classify whether it's a protein or an amino acid or whether it's a carbohydrate or whatever. And once it recognizes that, then the body will be able to instruct the glands to produce certain enzymes to digest the food. Okay? You need to have consciousness and awareness to be able to recognize and then instruct the glands to produce those enzymes, correct?
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and also when you are attacked by bacteria, by germs, the body also knows. So the body is so intelligent, the immune system will be able to recognize this bacteria that came in before, and it will remember antibodies that it had used to combat them, and it will reproduce those antibodies. So this is happening all the time without your mind knowing a single thing.
Okay, so I'm going to use this word to help me remember that awareness is happening all the time. So A for A, awareness all the time.
Okay?
Right?
Awareness is happening all the time, but mindfulness need not necessarily be.
That's right. Yeah. So awareness all the time.
Right.
Bhante, there's a written questions in the chat.
Okay.
The question is sampajañña the same as the general awareness?
No, it's not. Sampajañña is a clear awareness or clear knowing. It is prefixed by this word clear. Clear awareness, which means that you are clearly aware of what's happening. Clearly aware of what's happening in the sense of knowing also the circumstances, why something is happening, and the repercussions or the consequences of what has happened. So it's clear awareness in the sense of clear comprehension. But it has a range. Sampajañña has a range from low end to high end. If you have attended any of my retreats before, you should know about this.
Is sati equals to mindfulness or awareness?
Of course, sati is mindfulness, not awareness. Ānāpānassati, right? Mindfulness of in-breath and out-breath.
Hello, Bhante. Yeah, can I just safely say that mindfulness is actually the mind knows, because awareness is always there.
Right.
Yeah, but without the knowing. Can I say that?
No, that's another problem. No, the word "know" in English is also a big problem, because the word "know" in English has got such a wide range of meaning.
Right.
It could mean I know you. It could mean I know you very well. Correct or not? I know this subject means I'm really well versed in it. And it goes so, know in a sense of just being conscious.
Right.
So that's why this is also another very strange word which we try to avoid using it.
Okay. So what would be an appropriate word to use for the sake of explanation instead of know?
Conscious.
Cautious?
Understand?
Okay.
Okay, for example, just now I gave you the example of ānāpānassati, correct? First, the opening instructions of the Buddha was, ever mindful, he breathes in, ever mindful, he breathes out. All right? And after that, he goes on to say, when breathing in long, he knows I'm breathing in long. Okay, that is pajanati. The Pāli word for mindfulness is sati. This one is pajanati. Pajanati is actually the verb for panya. Panya is wisdom. Right?
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
Sadhu.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. What I want to ask is just now your explanation on this awareness and mindfulness. So you're saying that we are all the time aware of something. Now, whereas mindfulness, we are aware of the immediate past, or the immediate distant past, or the very future past. But if our mind is wandering from past to the past to the past, then where is the mindfulness? Because mindfulness means we have to know what's going on now from the conventional mindfulness. So if we are only mindful of the remembering the past and the distant past and the very distant past, then where is the mindfulness?
You see, that remembering distant past, that is also a form of mindfulness. Because the job of mindfulness is to be aware of a past object. But that's the wrong mindfulness. That's not right mindfulness. That's why we have right mindfulness, wrong mindfulness, and ordinary mindfulness.
Okay. Okay. So that means if we want to have the right mindfulness, we must be mindful of what's just happened, right? And then be prepared to act on what has just happened.
Not necessarily, because you need to have right mindfulness to remember instructions when you are listening or reading them. And then you need to recollect those instructions. And you have to remind yourself to apply those instructions that you remembered. All these are also part of mindfulness, right? And the final one is retrospect. Retrospect is looking back. So mindfulness encompasses all these four aspects, not just one.
Okay, sorry, one final point. For example, if I'm remembering all this, but I take a spoon from my teacup and then put it into my nose instead of my mouth. So where does that mindfulness come from? Because I'm thinking all about the past, but then what I'm trying to do now, I can't even remember that I have to put it out and put it in nose instead. How does that work?
You see, the mind works so fast. You are not actually being continuously mindful. You are lost in thoughts about the past. Yeah. And then even at the present moment, there are always intentions involved. Intentions will arise before you follow them, right? Not? If you can catch the intentions, then you can decide whether you want to do or not. Right? So if you are lost in remembering things of the past and you are not retrospecting what's happening at the present moment, then you have lost the continuity of mindfulness.
Okay. So okay, I quite understand you now. So that means you have to be mindful all the time,
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for taking my question. Like during meditation, we see the mindfulness following behind the object, and the object in the sense that my the thoughts arising and passing away, but not knowing the content of the thought. However, there is still a knowing mind that is seeing this mindfulness arising and passing away with the thoughts. So that knowing mind, knowing that mindfulness is actually mindfulness. Right? Whether I put the question right, but there is this knowing mind that is knowing that mindfulness that is following behind the object, because when the object arises, then only the mindfulness comes. And but then the mindfulness is not aware of the content of the thought, and it is through this like a translation by the knowing mind. Then you see, oh, the knowing mind understand that, oh, this thought is like that.
I see what you mean. Okay. You see, if you have attended my workshops before, you might remember.
Yes, I've attended Bhante's workshop.
Yes. You might remember the simile of the glass of water.
Yes.
Right? The glass of water. You have a glass of water, and that water in the glass is distilled water. And then you have all these droplets of dye you put into that glass of water. So that glass of water will turn color depending on the proportion of the different dyes, correct?
Yes.
The different dyes and the proportions. It will change all the time depending on the composition of those dyes. So that is the chitta, the mind. The pure distilled water is consciousness, vijnana.
Yes.
All right? And then what colors that chitta are all those droplets of dye. And they represent other things like pañña, like wisdom, understanding, positive qualities like mindfulness, like composure. Or it could also be other unwholesome things like greed, hatred, delusion, jealousy, and so forth. Yeah. All these are represented by the droplets of dye. Okay? So when there is mindfulness is only one of the droplets. And there are also other droplets as well. They are arising at the same time together with consciousness, because consciousness does not arise by itself. When consciousness arises, all these other things must arise, a combination of them. So when there's consciousness and there's mindfulness, there could also be pañña. There could be wisdom, that is knowing and understanding. Right? Mindfulness does not understand. Mindfulness only observes the past object. Thus, understanding comes from wisdom.
So that's why there's actually a gap when you see the mindfulness. It's like the mindfulness passed away already. Then only the knowing mind knows, oh, what is this thought, and So that explains for the gap whereby actually mindfulness is just aware. Again, come back to the word awareness. It's just aware, but really mindful is the mind that is mindful of.
Yeah, correct. Right. You see, mindfulness does not have wisdom.
Yeah.
Understanding does not come from mindfulness. Mindfulness is only collecting the data. Understanding of pañña or sampajañña is what understands the data that is collected.
I cannot see the so many droplets, but what I can see is just the arising and passing away of mindfulness together with the object, with the thoughts, and then and there is this knowing mind. This knowing mind actually also pass away one.
Yeah, exactly.
It also pass away, but cannot see it as synchronizing with the passing away of the mindfulness. But I know it passes away. So when we seize it, it's like an interpreter is is trying to understand what is happening, and then there is the real knowing.
Right. That's the insight. That's where insight comes.
Oh, okay. Right. So I understand better a bit about what is mindfulness and awareness now.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.
When we are aware of this quality of the mindfulness, whether it is like clear, strong, weak, blur, that kind of knowing or awareing of this quality of mindfulness, is it perception?
Yes. Perception. And like what just now Kanti was saying, she's able to see that the pairing of the mindfulness with the object arising and passing away, that's pañña. Wisdom sees that. Wisdom understands that. Okay?
Okay, Bhante, I'll read out the question. This is from Sister Michelle Lee. When I meditate more than an hour, I'm aware of feeling restlessness. When I note the restlessness, I'm not aware of how it arises. Restlessness grows and there is an urge to stop the sitting. Where should my mind place the restlessness?
When you are restless, first of all, you have to find out. Did you make any determination or resolution to sit for a specific period of time? If you had earlier made a decision that you will sit only for 1 hour, when that hour is up, automatically the mind becomes restless because it has finished its task. That's one. Okay? So if you did not sit with such a deadline, you just say, I'm just going to sit as long as I can. Yeah? Same also, because when the mind becomes restless, it's like you have reached the limit of your ability to continue to sit. What you need to do is, first of all, you have to make sure that when you do a sitting, you want to do it for a certain period of time. All right? And that whatever tasks that you have to do have to be completed first. If not, in the middle of your sitting, then you remember, oh, I forgot to do this task, I must do this task. Right, so all these tasks that you have not completed, you should have planned for them to be done after your sitting, so that they won't bother you. Unless it's something very urgent which you forgot and that needs to be attended to, then no choice, you have to get up and do it. Okay, first thing is make sure that you don't have any unfinished business while you are sitting. Secondly, when you have not reached your target yet, let's say you want to sit for 1 hour, and 15 minutes into your sitting, you start to get restless, then ask yourself, why? Why is the mind restless? There are a couple of reasons for restlessness. One is because you are bored. Why are you bored? Okay, so ask yourself, why are you bored? And see that boredom is a form of suffering. It's caused by a desire. There is a desire behind it. So ask yourself, what's wrong with sitting down? What else would the mind do instead of doing what it is doing? Okay? You just ask yourself, why are you restless? And then you can find the answer. You ask yourself, why are you restless? And then you come back to your meditation. And then you get restless again. Ask yourself why. Look at the root cause of restlessness. Or is it because too much pain, you have reached your threshold already? If you already reached your threshold, then you got no choice. You have to move or you have to get up. Hope that answers your question.
The next question from Brother Ong Guan Leong. What are the salient similarities and pertinent differences between Bhante's teaching of open awareness and that of Sayadaw U Tejaniya, Krishnamurti, bare awareness, and Lumpur Pramote Pamojjo, watching the mind of Thailand?
Now, in order to answer that question, one has to be a practitioner of all these different methods. Then only you can give a fair answer. Well, I am not a practitioner of all these methods. I don't follow Jiddu Krishnamurti, nor do I follow Ajahn Pramote, although I've listened to one or two of his talks. I've listened to his ebook. So I cannot really give you a satisfactory answer. So what I've done is I've asked some of my students who have also meditated with Sayadaw U Tejaniya and Lumpur Pramote of Thailand, and also one student who is a very keen follower of Krishnamurti. She listens to Krishnamurti very often. And I actually have compiled a table for that. I've tabulated it. So it's quite comprehensive, and I don't think that I want to share it among the others here. I suggest that I send the table to you through email and you go through it. Okay? Now, another thing that I want to correct is that the word bare awareness was never used by Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti used the word choiceless awareness. That was the word that was very, very popular in the early 80s. Yeah, when a lot of Westerners were all crazy over Krishnamurti. Everybody is talking about choiceless awareness. Bare awareness was an invention, or bare attention rather, was the invention of Bhante Nyanaponika, who wrote the book The Heart of Buddhist Meditation after he had undergone a few months of intensive retreat in the Mahasi tradition in Yangon. Okay?
Yeah, Bhante, I want to ask, okay, let's say mindfulness itself, like you said, mentioned just now, is no wisdom at all. Actually, I talk with someone, but if I have mindful at that moment, and I saw my thought that moment, I have two thoughts. One is good. One is going to say the good things to that person. Then the other thought is no, I don't want to do this. But at the end, the gangster mind is win. And I have no idea why. Then I make a conflict, but I'm mindful that, and I get shocked at the moment. I feel like, what happened to me? I can see it, but why I do this? Why I didn't choose the one I can make people happy? Then I didn't create any conflict. Then I really get shocked at the moment. Same as now, when I want to raise the hand, I saw my heart is I feel nervous. I think of many thoughts come in. Then I say, what happened? I just talk to you. I just ask the question why I feel so nervous and I don't know how to handle. But I have mindful what to do with this, Bhante, and how to make myself, like when I have this mindful and I still can calm myself, and I also can become a wisdom person, or these kind of things.
Have you attended any of my retreats?
Yes.
Which one?
I attend you a lot also online. I also been SPS quite long. I joined Bhante's Hokkien retreat and two times and online.
Okay, I think your mind is not composed enough and there's not enough wisdom. You see, you have mindfulness, but there's no wisdom. That's why you cannot make the right decision.
Yeah.
So you need to practice more, try to compose the mind more. When composure comes because of mindfulness, right? Because if you're mindful enough, you can catch your intentions and not pursue those unproductive intentions. And then you just come back to your senses. That will create a dynamic sort of composure. That dynamic composure will be very useful so that it can help your mind to make wise decisions. Okay? So you need to develop more on that.
Bhante, develop what you means develop more means meditate more or read more?
No. Meditate more. Meditate in the sense of trying to practice continuity of mindfulness. throughout your daily life, not only when you are doing a formal sitting or formal walking. Try to come back to the five senses as often as you can, whenever you don't have any productive intentions to follow. So you catch your intentions, you find that they are non-productive, then don't indulge in them, don't follow them.
Okay, but if they insist, so we need to practice whatever. So try to focus on the right one.
Right.
Bhante,
Yes.
short question. If sati is mindfulness, what is awareness actually in Pali? Because I'm confused with different terminology from different authors, different teachers. Thank you.
Didn't I say from the beginning that because the word awareness has this very general and non-specific meaning of just being conscious of an object, it is avoided by most translators as a rendering for any Buddhist term. And the only exception is Ajahn Thanisaro. And he translates Ceto as awareness, and that's why he created this confusion. Awareness release. You know? I think liberation of the mind sounds more sensible than awareness release, because nobody knows what that means. Right?
So, Bhante, next time if I were to report to you, I say, Bhante, I'm aware of the nagging feeling of the mind at the moment. So technically, doesn't make sense, isn't it? It should be like, Bhante, I'm mindful of the nagging feeling of the mind at the moment.
Correct, yes.
Is that right?
Right, correct.
Thank you. I need to clarify that so that I make myself clear.
Right. In my earlier explanation, although I've drawn the line very clearly between awareness and mindfulness, this is not the end of the matter. Other teachers will continue to use the word awareness in whatever way they like. And don't try to be too clever to try to correct them. Okay? The most important thing for you is to know where they are coming from, to understand the context of how they use the word awareness, so that you can follow their instructions properly. That's all. You don't have to try to correct them. They have a right to use awareness in whatever way they want to. All right? Okay. So next, please.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year.
Oh, you're in SBS. Okay.
Okay, Bhante, my question is related to sense. So we have 6 sense, which is a 5 plus 1 sense. And the mind senses is quite sometimes would be able to play around with the rest of the 5 sense, and it can actually put something to the rest of the sense. I might hear some voice which is not really happening, but I might feel like I hear it. I might see something which is not really there, but I thought that I seen it, or even so. In that case, I'm not sure whether I'm aware or I'm actually indulging in some kind of imaginations which is confuse me in terms of whether I'm mindful at that times.
You see, you have heard of schizophrenics.
Yes.
Schizophrenics have hallucinations of what is happening at the senses. And it is actually no fault of them. It is not because their mind purposely created those hallucinations. It is because the mind is influenced by the body. And their body system is such that they produce certain hormones more than what they are required to. Right? So the brain will produce certain biochemicals that stimulate the mind to create hallucinations. And they cannot differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. Right? That's why it is a psychiatric problem. So these people, they have to take psychiatric drugs to control the mechanism of the secretion of the biochemicals in the body. Now, when they are on the drugs and the drugs control that part of the brain so that it doesn't overproduce that biochemical, then it's okay. But when it goes off that drug, then it will create hallucinations again, and that could create a lot of problems. Okay, so that's why also in some traditions in South America, they take herbs and they get into an altered state of consciousness Yeah, because the mind is affected by the herbs, right? Because the herbs will stimulate the mind to produce certain biochemicals and alter their state of consciousness. So you might be mindful, but you have no control. Yeah, because the mind is under the control of the biochemicals in the body. I don't know what is happening in your case.
In most of the times, it doesn't actually accompany with a sense of fear or what. It's just that, am I confused or am I sure? Am I not sure? I think that is, but indeed that is what causing some confusions.
Yeah, maybe you need to seek some avenue from a psychiatrist, yeah, to see, because it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just like any other illness, It's an imbalance in the body. This is due to past karma. It's the past karma that caused the body to behave in such a way. All right? Okay. So for such people who really have a psychiatric problem, chemical imbalance in your body, then it is not advisable to practice a focused mindfulness practice. That will tend to aggravate the matter. So you try to practice just open mindfulness on a daily basis. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Bhante, we go to the next written question by Sister Lei Hun. Can insight and wisdom develop by practicing open awareness meditation only in daily activities without doing formal sitting or walking meditation?
If you look at the scriptures, all the accounts of non-bhikkhus who got enlightened show that lay people don't go for intensive retreats. They didn't go for intensive retreats at that time because there were no such thing as a retreat center. I guess it's because of the complexity of lay life at that time, because of the very low technology, so everything was very labor intensive and people had to spend a lot of time trying to survive and to earn a living, so they got no time to go for retreats like now. And yet, those times, all of these non-bhikkhus, they got enlightened by listening to Dhamma talks. Right? So before that, they were not doing any sort of open awareness practice or open mindfulness practice or anything. They were just listening, and at that time, when something clicked, and then they got enlightened. Now, I also often say that to what degree of samadhi or composure one needs to attain in order for insight or wisdom to break through into enlightenment is very subjective. It depends on the individual. All right. So if you, as a layperson, or even as a monastic, if you find that you have time and the aptitude for intensive retreat, go ahead and do it. If you find that circumstances do not permit you to go for an intensive retreat, then try to practice continuity of mindfulness in your daily life. I would say that daily practice of mindfulness in terms of continuity of mindfulness in daily life would create more opportunities for real insight than just having that mindfulness in a 1 month or 2 weeks retreat. And then after that, forgetting all about it and coming back to your daily life, back to square one. Your chances are much more slimmer than if you were to maintain continuity of mindfulness in your daily life without even going for an intensive retreat. Okay, so it is possible. The best, of course, is to have a combination of both. Yeah, if you don't have the opportunity to do a long-term intensive retreat, then make sure that you practice continuity of mindfulness in your daily life. Okay?
This question from Brother Chan Wei San. I'm using a simplified form of the open awareness meditation, 3S and 2T open awareness. The 3S stand for sight, sound, and smell, and the 2T stand for touch and taste. I move from each of the above in a round-robin manner, each taking 2 seconds. That way, I'm always with the 5 senses with minimum thoughts in the head. I sometimes put perfume on my shirt to provide the strong smell. Is this in line with your teaching?
No, that's because you come from the focused mindfulness background. That's why you are still stuck to that. You see, in my teachings of open mindfulness, I say free and easy, touch and go. You don't have to go around in a round robin manner from one sense to another. You just step back and allow the mind to move freely among the senses. Whatever is apparent, let the mind be aware of it. As soon as you're aware of something, ask the mind, what else? And let the mind move on. Right? You don't have to stay there for 2 seconds and then move on to another sense door for 2 seconds in a fixed routine, in a fixed roster. Not necessary. And also, you don't have to try to stimulate your environment. You don't have to purposely put perfume or don't have to purposely pinch yourself, unless you are suffering from something really, really very serious, depression or obsessive thinking, and you cannot get rid of that, and you want to really have strong sense stimulation to anchor your mind, then perhaps you can resort to such things. Otherwise, you don't have to do that. Okay?
Okay, Bhante, this is from Sister Chan BC at Sankara Sutta WhatsApp chat group. Someone mentioned that open awareness is samatha practice. Through my understanding, open awareness is to be aware of the 5 sense objects, 561, with equanimous mind. Be mindfully aware and knowing as the object arises, then return to any of the 5 senses according to conditioned phenomena. Thus, it appears more like vipassanā to me, which is choiceless, rather than samatha focused attention on single object only. Bhante, the question is, can Bhante elaborate and explain whether my understanding is correct?
Well, there are 2 parts to open mindfulness practice. The first part is when you try to anchor your mind to the 5 senses, just to keep the mind occupied so that it does not get caught up in compulsive or obsessive thinking or daydreams. At that time, you are not required to investigate into how things arise and pass away or to see the 3 characteristics. All you need to do is to just make sure that your mind is not caught up in thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. This is to develop samatha, how to still your mind of all these extraneous thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Vipassana starts only when there is investigation. When there's investigation, then you have to try to verify the 3 characteristics and cause, condition, and effect. And that happens only when one has attained to the 2nd stage of composure, where thoughts are spaced far apart. Not when there are so many thoughts, one after another, that you cannot even differentiate the thoughts. That is the 1st stage of composure, where your mind is restless, but still you are able to come back to your senses and not get pulled by those restless thoughts or reject them. You still have some basic control. You don't push away those restlessness, you don't follow those restlessness, you allow the restlessness to happen. At the same time, you try to be aware of the 5 senses. That will also develop composure. But as you do that, then what will happen is the thoughts, the restlessness will subside, and the thoughts will become less and less, and there will be gaps in between the thoughts. So when there are gaps in between the thoughts, then you can start vipassana by inclining the mind to verify the 3 characteristics and cause, condition, and effect. Inclining the mind doesn't mean intellectually trying to analyze, but just arousing a wish of wanting to know, wanting to see from experience, and then after that, drop that thought and then come back to just watch the 5 senses. Okay? So the initial part of open mindfulness practice is samatha. You only go to vipassana when you begin investigation by inclining the mind, not by intellectual investigation. Okay, next please.
I also understand from the sutta that samatha and vipassana are yoked together in practice. Either one can be applied through one's discernment as skillful means. Example, in daily life, at a very chaotic situation, I may just come back to breath only or metta only in order to keep the mind at peace.
Well, which sutta says that samatha and vipassana are yoked together in practice? There's only one sutta. There's Mahasalayatana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. In another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, called the Yuganadda Sutta, Āyasmā Aggacitta said that any monk or nun who comes to him to declare arahantship will say that they attain enlightenment or liberation through 4 ways or one of them. The first one is vipassana preceded by samatha, which means to say you start with samatha first and then you move on to vipassana. Just like the way I teach open mindfulness, you start off with samatha first and then you move on to vipassana. Or you can have samatha preceded by vipassana, which means you start off with vipassana first and then you go on to samatha later. The third one is samatha and vipassana yoked together. And the last one is none of the above. Okay, so there are 4 ways. Although the sutta says that 4 or one of them, I would think that it is either one or a combination of them. So sometimes that the person could have attained the first stage of enlightenment through number 1, and then the second one maybe to number 2, and the third one maybe to number 1 again, and the last one maybe based on the 4th. So the other part of your question is whether one can use any of these according to circumstances, according to your discernment. That's true. That's true. Any of these can work, but then you have to look at the circumstances, your state of mind, the circumstances, to practice the one that is most appropriate. Okay?
Sister Jane Tan. I feel a bit tired doing open awareness meditation, then close eyes, but I feel I'm able to be more calm following my breath. I also feel better half close my eyes. I feel my head, mind getting heavier, having to gaze straight into space instead of lowering my gaze. Bhante, need your guidance.
Looks like you come from a focused mindfulness background. The mind has been habituated to stay with the breath, and so it's a steep learning curve. You have to be very patient to switch to open mindfulness. What I would suggest is that you try to practice open mindfulness more in the non-formal sitting posture. Walking, or maybe standing, or doing some easy, safe activity to habituate your mind. When the mind becomes habituated and then you get back to sitting practice, it might be easier to overcome this old habit of just wanting to close your eyes and focus on the breath. All right? Hope that helps you.
Next question from Sister Su Hua. Is there a deeper awareness that can be aware of all the 6 consciousness associated with our 6 senses?
From the Theravada point of view, there are only 6 types of consciousness. The 5 sense consciousness and the mind consciousness. Mahayana, they have extra 2 consciousness, number 7 and number 8. That is a different system. So for us, there is only one type of a consciousness, and that is the mind consciousness, that is able to be aware of all the 5 sense consciousness as well as the mind consciousness. The 5 consciousness can only be aware of their respective sense objects. The eye cannot be conscious of what the ear is hearing or what the nose is smelling. Yeah? But the mind consciousness can be conscious of what the eyes see, the ears hear, nose smells, and so forth. The mind consciousness can be aware of any of these 5 sense objects, as well as objects which are not cognized by the 5 senses, including concepts. So, from Theravada point of view, there's only mind consciousness. And if you're talking about consciousness looking at another consciousness, as I said earlier, the thumb cannot touch itself. A person in a house cannot have an external view of the house. So one moment of consciousness cannot be aware of itself while it is happening. That consciousness has to pass away first, and then a second consciousness will arise, and that second consciousness can be aware of the previous one. And that awareness of the previous consciousness is done by sati, or mindfulness. And I explained just now earlier to Kanti, the chitta of the mind has many components. So sati is just one of them. Sati is the one that looks back at what had just happened. But the understanding is done by another department, and that is sampajañña or pañña. Okay, hope that answers your question.
Bhante, we have also received questions from participants who have yet to attend any of Bhante's retreat. Shall I start with your question?
Any of my students want to ask any more questions? If not, then we will move on to the others.
This question is from Brother Lo Lian He. Is there such a thing as a closed mindfulness?
I only talked about two types of mindfulness: focused mindfulness and open mindfulness. So the opposite of open mindfulness is focused mindfulness. Focused mindfulness is when you focus on a single object, like in ānāpānassati, mindfulness of the in-breath and out-breath. You focus on the breath only. Open mindfulness is when you open up the mindfulness to what is happening at the six senses. So that is the difference. Instead of one single object, you open it up to many objects. That's why it's called open mindfulness. We don't have this terminology, closed mindfulness. The opposite of open mindfulness is focused mindfulness.
Hi, Bhante.
Hello.
Hi. It's not being mindful the same as forgetfulness.
Exactly. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have from Brother Shai Hao that sent 3 questions. The first question is, what advice do you have on using open mindfulness to watch the defilements? Anger and greed can be particularly strong forces, while delusion is always hiding.
Yeah, as I always say, you should try to attain the second level of composure first before you attempt to observe what's going on in the mind or investigate what's going on in the mind. Yeah, so in the first level of composure, you want to ground the mind in the 5 senses so that it is not affected by the restlessness and the many thoughts that are going in and out of your mind. So when you're able to become equanimous about them, you don't push them away, you don't follow them, then you attain the first level of composure. When you go on to the second level, when the thoughts are spaced far apart, your emotions are spaced far apart, then you can start to observe them. And I said, you just observe them in a sense of inclining your mind, not to investigate or not to intellectually analyze. For example, you might see anger arising, and then you could ask yourself, what is the cause of the anger? Ask the question, and then don't think about it. Drop it, and then come back to just being aware of the senses. Free and easy, touch and go. And then when the time is ripe, when the conditions are ripe, then wisdom will arise and let you know why that anger arose. Okay? But if you are someone who is very adept in open mindfulness practice, who has done it continuously for a long time, sometimes it's very easy. You just incline the mind and immediately the answer will arise. You don't have to wait. That's because the mind has been trained to give insightful answers. If that doesn't happen yet, please be patient. Okay?
Some people recommend to maintain mindfulness with non-judgemental and kindness. Is that necessary? Does it help the practice, or does it add more unnecessary burden?
As I said, mindfulness has one simple function. And that function of mindfulness is just to bring a past object to the mind's attention. And I said just now, the mind has got many departments. Mindfulness is only one department. Once that past object is brought to the mind's attention, then the other departments in the mind will start working on it. Yeah, you have vitakka, vichara, which is initial thinking and discursive thinking. Then you have wisdom, you have delusion, you have greed, you have hatred, you have loving kindness, you have compassion. Many things are happening in the mind. So it depends on which one has been cultivated and which one is stronger. That particular department will dominate the others. Right? So actually mindfulness by itself doesn't have this quality of being judgmental or kindness. Judgmental comes from another department in the mind. Right? From your past perceptions and your thinking. That is what creates the judgment. Past experience, clinging on to expectations of how people should behave, that brings about all these judgmental comments in the mind. So if you practice open mindfulness and you keep on watching your mind while anchoring yourself to the five senses, this will become very apparent to you. Comments, they keep on coming and going, and you cannot control them because they are all due to cause, condition, and effect. Past conditioning. You can't control them, but you can understand them and you can see their cause and condition. When you see the cause and condition, then wisdom will arise and tell you that those causes and conditions may have been applicable in the past, but they are no longer applicable now. The same standards don't have to be applied under new circumstances. And then when wisdom realizes that, automatically it will drop. That's how you undo your judgments. Not through intellectual analysis, but through observation and intuitive wisdom.
I like reading, writing, and contemplating spiritual texts, but I'm worried I might become overly intellectual in my practice. How do I strike the right balance?
Well, read when you need to, when you want to, when you need some intellectual stimulation, you need some inspiration, you can read and contemplate. But also discipline yourself to practice without unnecessary thinking. Reading and understanding what the suttas tell us is one thing, and that is actually giving you instructions on how to practice so that you can purify yourself. There's only the theory. So you have to apply this theory, recollect what you had read, remind yourself to apply them in your daily life, and then retrospect, look back at yourself constantly to see whether you are applying or not. Do it as continually as you can. Okay, so you need to have some discipline. Time to read, you read. Time to contemplate, you contemplate. Time to practice open mindfulness, you just practice open mindfulness.
Okay, Bhante, it's 6:18 now. We have some written question in the chat box. Do you want to take the questions?
Okay.
Okay, I start with the Lao Chai Hun. Question to Bhante: why our teacher mentions be mindful of the present only during meditation? Hence, the teacher should say be aware of the present during meditation and not be mindful. Am I correct?
As I said, the word awareness is very general. It can be used for any object, past, present, future, or beyond. So you can't fault the teacher for using that, but it's non-specific. Yeah. But then, you see, if you want to talk about conventional language, we say try to be in the present. That's conventional language. As long as you understand what he means, that's good enough. You don't have to be very precise and say, try to be aware of the immediate past. It doesn't make sense to most people. You understand that being in the present means being mindful of the immediate past in the ultimate sense. All right?
From Style Hao Tan, since languages cannot be easily translated from one to the other, would learning Pāli be essential in advancing one's practices?
I wouldn't say it's essential. I would say that it's desirable if you have the aptitude and the time. Even though You may be a Pāli scholar, but if you don't have experience or the guidance of a competent, experienced teacher, that will not really help you to understand the scriptures. It must be both in tandem. You must have the theory as well as the practice. The thing, of course, is if you have good karma, then you can rely on a competent, experienced teacher who is ambidextrous, who is good in theory as well as in practice. Then it will save you a lot of trouble. But then we don't really know, who to trust and who not to trust. So if you want to be really self-reliant, then you have to study the suttas, study the Pāli, study the suttas, and try to relate what you study to your own practice. And you can consult other teachers, and then you pick whatever you think is most appropriate. Okay?
Okay, we have a question from you. Bhante, can I interpret that the awareness is generated automatically or naturally whether you have the awareness or not? While meditation process is training our mind to practice mindfulness, always knowing of the immediate past objects.
If it is automatically generated, whether you have awareness or not doesn't fit in, right? Awareness is there all the time. Awareness happens at all the six senses, even when you are asleep. When you're asleep, you think that your body is not aware. Your body systems are still working. Your body systems are still functioning. They are aware. Your ears are also listening to sounds, but the mind is not aware. So all the senses are actually still working. It's just that the mind is not aware of what is happening at the other senses. It's either lost in its own nightmares or in dreams or dreamless deep sleep, where the mind is still conscious or aware of objects, but it is unable to recall them when one wakes up. Okay, and of course it's correct, the practice of mindfulness is to continually look back at the past, at the immediate past, to understand things as they really unfold. But I always say that looking back at the immediate past is only one part of mindfulness. Don't forget, mindfulness has this, all the 4 hours. You need to remember instructions when you listen to them. You have to remember the theory of the 3 characteristics of cause, condition, and effect. These are theory that I explained to you. So you have to remember and understand and then recollect them, remind yourself to apply them, and then retrospect to verify that these things really are true. Okay? All right.
Is it important for practitioner to distinguish and differentiate what's going on in the mind and body is awareness or mindfulness?
I could say that it is not really important, but it's important for the practitioner to understand the difference between awareness and mindfulness, so that when teachers use the words in their own way, you can know where they are coming from and understand their instructions properly so that you can practice accordingly. Now that's important.
How to generate desires for skillful quality that have not arisen, as in right effort?
Oh, right effort itself is a desire to arouse wholesome qualities and a desire to abandon unwholesome qualities if they have arisen, desire to prevent unwholesome qualities before they have arisen. Right? The desire, then that's the first part that is related to unwholesome mental states. In relation to wholesome mental states, there's a desire to arouse wholesome mental states that have not yet arisen. For example, arouse mindfulness, activate mindfulness, activate compassion, activate loving kindness. These are the wholesome qualities. Activate composure, peace of mind, right? You try to activate this, and once these have been activated, you try to maintain them and develop them to fulfillment. Okay?
I'm actually very concerned because I learned from late Bhante Dhamma Buddha. As far as I understand from him, he said that right mindfulness, which is the 7th of the Eightfold Path, is actually vipassanā. You contemplate your body, you contemplate your emotion, the feeling, you contemplate your mind, and that you contemplate Dhamma, right? Then this is what the Buddha taught on the right mindfulness. Then today, what I've heard from you is that you have changed open awareness to open mindfulness. This has never been mentioned in the suttas. Buddha is not the Buddha's method. It's just like Mahasi method, you see. So what I'm interested as a Buddhist is only to learn the Buddha's method, ānāpānassati, right? And that as an late Dhamma Buddha, as I understood from him also, that whenever you are sitting down, you only learn ānāpānassati. You only meditate on ānāpānassati. When you open your eyes, you walk out, that is where the vipassanā will come into action. So you're always aware of it, and you're aware of your speech, you're aware of your action. So what is your comment on this?
Yeah, that's one way of teaching. I mean, different teachers have got different approaches. I wouldn't want to argue with that. Every teacher has his own way of teaching, and each student also has a choice of following whichever teacher that they have an affinity with. I just gave a talk recently. The video has been fully edited and uploaded to YouTube. It's called "Is Open Awareness in the Suttas?" Yeah, if you're interested to see whether open awareness is in the suttas or not, please go to YouTube and watch those videos. There are 3 parts of the video. Okay?
I think, Bhante, that's all. And brother, sister, let's put a palm together to say sadhu 3 times to Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay.